You're listening to Autumn on the Air, the weekly podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. Join us for interviews with patent and licensing professionals, innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech transfer leaders on the issues and trends that matter most. Keep listening for an inside track on the people, IP policies, and politics changing our world.
Welcome to today's episode of Autumn on the Air. I'm your host, Lisa Mueller. Despite being behind many key innovations and patents, studies show that women are less likely to commercialize their innovations. Today, we're discussing the experiences and insights of leading women scientists, researchers, and inventors. We have two prolific and leading women with us today. Dr. Marianne Privett, a partner and patent attorney with extensive knowledge in chemistry and materials science. Marianne manages patent portfolios for a diverse range of clients, including multinationals and universities, with a focus on clean tech. She's a strong advocate for women inventors and entrepreneurs and actively participates in networks like Women in Health Tech and the Global Women Inventors and Innovators Network. Dr. Aardra is a professor at the University of Kentucky specializing in plant pathology. Her research delves into the intricate signaling mechanisms in plants, particularly how they adapt and respond to various pathogens. Aardra has received numerous awards for her work and is deeply involved in outreach, including workshops for youth and presentations to farmers. Welcome, Marianne and Aardra. So excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Well, I'm really excited to have you both here. And I thought maybe the best way to kick the podcast off was for me to ask each of you if you could share a brief overview of your journey in science and innovation and what inspired you to pursue your respective fields. And maybe, Marianne, if you want to start off.
Okay. So I always enjoyed science at school. So I chose to study science at university, and I started off studying straight chemistry. And then with my PhD, I moved more towards materials chemistry. And I was enjoying it, but I quickly realized that research wasn't for me. I found it quite frustrating. And I started to look into other potential career paths, and I realized that patents was a good way to kind of marry up business with science. So I didn't want to move away entirely from science. I wanted to continue to be involved in new inventions, although not that I would necessarily use the word invention at that point, but new technology and new ideas in the area. So when I found out about patents, that seemed to be a really good way to combine science and business. And yeah, it suited me very well. I enjoy finding out about new things. I enjoy working with a range of different clients, and it's always challenging and always varied.
Yeah, and you're an inventor yourself, aren't you?
No, I'm not. I've worked with inventors, and I've worked quite closely with inventors. So I'd like to think, given them ideas that maybe have led to slight improvements, but I wouldn't say I'm a straight out inventor.
Ah, got it. Okay. How about you, Aardra?
Well, like Marianne, I started off really loving science, but then our stories diverged because, I'm a researcher. So I don't know if there was a point in time that I consciously remember, but I just remember liking science a lot. When I was in middle school, my dad got me one of those home microscopes, and I would drive my mother nuts because I would leave food out to mold in her kitchen so I could look at it under the microscope.
Awesome. That's great.
Really mad at me. But really, I think the credit for getting me into research goes to one of my undergraduate teachers. And this was in the early 80s, when undergraduate research was not a big thing. At least not, I grew up in India. So not in India, there was no money. But he was very good about having us do these those of us that were interested, we would get to do these little experiments and ask, important questions. And so that that led me to a graduate program that was very much research focused. And then that's how I ended up in this field. I knew I loved research, all through my master's program. I couldn't wait for my courses to be over so I could be in the lab. But I knew that I couldn't work with animals. So I chose plant research.
And how about you? Are you an inventor?
Yes, I am. I have 2 patents, and I have a company based on one of those.
That's fantastic. Congratulations. That's really incredible. And it's really good to hear as well. So, Marianne, I wanted to turn back to you for a second because I know you've worked with a wide range of clients from multinationals to SMEs. Can you share some insights into some of the unique challenges women inventors face in navigating the IP landscape?
Yeah, and I think my real engagement with this field came about a couple of years ago when there's World IP Day every year, and the theme 2 years ago was about women inventors. And I wanted to write an article for my firm's website on that topic. And when I started looking at the research in the area, it's really clear that the USPTO carried out research, as have WIPO, as have the European Patent Office, as have the UK Intellectual Property Office. And when you look, sadly, the same is true across all areas, across all areas of the globe, I should say, that women just aren't engaging as much with the patent process. At least I don't know about other forms of intellectual property so much, but they're not engaging with the patent process as much as you might expect. And although it's a bit of a crude measure in the sense that they're looking at names, and names are not always a guaranteed indicator of gender, but nonetheless, if you cut out the names that may be a bit kind of non-specific, like maybe say Alex and Sam, which might mean it might go for either, then you still end up with a very clear indicator that women are not engaging with patenting as much as you would expect. And you can look at there's patterns across different areas of technology. So you would see areas where there's fewer women studying at university, fewer women working in those areas in research, whether that be academic or commercial, and then also there's fewer patents filed by them. But even in the areas which are relatively female dominated, say more the biological sciences, you still see that there are significantly fewer women inventors than you would expect based on the kind of pool of people. So I don't think it's specific to science, I would say. So the article that I wrote, I talked about kind of ways that we can address this. And so you can go back to kind of a supply problem in the sense that there are fewer girls and younger women studying STEM subjects and continuing to study STEM subjects until later on in life. So getting to the point where maybe they would be in a research role. But also I think there has to be something about the kind of working environment and society at large that is preventing women who are established in these areas from putting themselves forward. So I think it is a societal issue. I think you then need to try and look at ways to address that, ways to give women more confidence in their ideas, encourage people who work with women in these areas to try and tackle the unconscious bias that we all have. There's no denying that we all have unconscious biases. So I think it's trying to take positive action to try and improve access. And universities can definitely do that. Commercial organizations can do that. Just all trying to really think, look at the pool of people who are engaging with their services or engaging with their patent department and thinking, why haven't I heard from so many people in this area? Why am I hearing more from these people? And if someone comes forward and says, I have this invention and these are the team of people who worked on it, then maybe having a slightly uncomfortable conversation and pushing back a bit and saying, why is this person contributed? Why is that person not included? I know you work with them. It's uncomfortable, but I think it has to be done.
Yeah. Why are there these women listed on a paper, but none of them ever show up as inventors? Yeah. Yes. To your point. Yeah. And Aardra, I wanted to ask you, having 2 patents yourself, how did you find navigating the IP landscape, and how, in fact, did you even, come about the decision of filing patents for your inventions?
So, Marianne, really touched on all of those points. And so I have to be honest, I have to admit that was not me who initiated the patenting, my patent, I co-invent. The company that I started also is co-founded with my husband, who's also faculty in the same department, does research in the similar field as me. And he's the one who decided, as when we made the discovery, he was like, oh, we have to contact the university patent office and see if it's worth it. And I think it comes from, there are some studies that I've read where women feel, something's not ready until it's 100% ready, whereas men, even if it's half baked, it's okay. And I think that's where so there's that societal change. So it never even occurred to me that the work we had done was ready for such a thing, whereas for him it was a no-brainer. So.
Yeah, I think you hit on something there, and that's what I wanted to follow on next, because studies have shown exactly to your point that women are less likely to commercialize their innovations. And I think a lot of it has to do is we're perfectionists, right? We want to make sure everything is perfect before we take it to the next step, whatever that might be. So besides that, do you think there are other reasons behind women don't commercialize their inventions? And what can we do about this issue?
Well, I know that startups which are set up by women find it harder to attract funding, unfortunately. So I think it's so even if you have a woman who has sufficient confidence in her ideas and who has who's ready to kind of push that idea out and try and get it to market, that person would still face more barriers than a man in the equivalent position. I'm involved in a couple of networks, which I think we'll come to later, and it's interesting the discussions in there as well, where even with female VCs, they don't always want to be seen as being a female-only VC. So then you end up with you might expect women to be more likely to fund women, but apparently that's not always the case. So I think it's there's been plenty of studies showing that if you have one diverse person put forward for an interview, for example, so you have a pool of interviews and you have a load of people who are just typical to the kind of the other people who work in that organization, and then you have someone who's a standout candidate for reasons of maybe gender or ethnicity or religion, then that person's less likely to go forward to the next stage of interview or get the job. If you have more than one person at that stage, then they don't stand out for just being the odd one out. They then get compared to each other rather than just being compared kind of unfavorably to all the rest. So I think maybe there's a case there with what you want, maybe not all women shortlist, but maybe you want to have multiple female-founded companies being put forward for funding at the same time. So again, they don't stand out for the reason of being female-founded. And equally, although it's probably a good idea to have, to encourage female founders to engage with female businesses, female-led businesses, nonetheless, some recognition that actually this has to come from society at large, from funders at large. So it has to come from men as well as women. It can't be, women aren't going to be able to solve it on their own, and may not want to be labeled as being someone who specializes in that kind of technology.
Aardra, what are your thoughts?
So I have to agree with that. Like, I've read that statistics too about women not getting, like losing out. It's actually like really scary, the statistics, the percentage of women that get funding. But I also think it's about having role models, And I know that right now we have fewer women role models, but we need to highlight them more, so that the younger generations can see that it's not just about thinking that this is possible, but it's about normalizing it, that it's normal for a woman to have a business or be an entrepreneur and lead a business or be a leader somewhere. And until we do that, I think it shouldn't be something that a young girl has to think about. Is this possible for me? It should not be a question in her mind. So I think that having those role models all along the way is very important, connecting them. Sometimes, there are these books, I don't know if you guys have read articles and books about how women can be successful in business or be leaders. And a lot of them are, don't smile too much. Don't say sorry too much.
Exactly.
And the world's a better place if we all use our polite words. So if you constantly keep telling me what not to do, like what is my essence and not to be me, then I'm putting half my energy there versus focusing on getting my job done. And so I think we have to move away from that narrative. Why do we have to be more like men in order to succeed?
We should be authentic, really, right?
Well.
Yeah. We should be authentic selves. Yeah.
So I think, as Marianne referred to, it's a societal thing, and we have to tackle it from all angles.
Yeah. And speaking of youth, I want to go back to that. You mentioned that briefly. I know, Aardra, you're heavily involved in educational outreach, and it's so important, as you've already mentioned, and you do things like workshops for youth and presentations to growers. Can you talk a little bit about how this outreach contributes to the commercialization of your research?
So I have to say that it's benefited me more than the other way around, at least my meetings with the growers. So you know how I'm a scientist, I'm not they keep telling me I'm now a businesswoman because I own a company, but business is not something I studied. So all the little programs that I did for commercialization, they emphasize customer discovery so much, right? You can never have enough customer discovery if you're starting a business. And I'll tell you a story. I was an assistant professor, so I'm just starting out. It was like 6 months into my job. And one of my mentors, he was a professor also in the same department. and I look up to him a lot. And he wants to bring me to this meeting with the local growers. And I'm thinking, I'm curious about the meeting, but I'm like, what am I going to do there? What am I going to tell them? I'm so much a lab researcher. I've never set foot on a soybean farm, and these are all soybean corn growers. So I go with him anyway, and all the researchers have 5 minutes to tell these growers about what we do in the lab. And I'm really racking my brains, and I can find like 2 pieces of data that may be remotely interesting to them. And I tell them about it. And then right after everybody finishes talking, these like bunch of growers, they make a beeline for me, and they're super excited. So I had told them about this chemical that the plant makes that helps the plant better defend itself against disease. And they're so excited, and they're like, is this available in a bottle? Where can I buy it? I want to try it in my field. And my research at that point was so early stage, but it was an eye-opening moment for me, because I had to wow, this is interesting to somebody who does not understand the science, and also I could see a path where what I'm doing in the lab can actually make it out into society and benefit. So that's been great. But also, I learn from these meetings all the time. Like, I've been going to those grower meetings for now over 20 years, and every meeting I go to, I learn something new.
So how do you integrate the concept of commercialization into your teaching and mentorship of students? And what impact do you hope to have on the next generation of researchers and inventors?
So in the classroom, it's interesting when you're teaching something that it's so much easier for a student to understand something if you show them that what you've studied actually is applicable or is being currently used in the world. So that's something a lot of teachers use. That's a tactic a lot of teachers will use to connect what you're teaching the student to what is happening, or a product or something out there in the field. So, which I did also a lot with the courses that I taught. But for me, it's it's the little things. So, for instance, a couple years ago, this was when we were thinking of starting a company. I had an undergraduate student who wasn't really my advisee. He was somebody in my class, and he knew that he wanted to go to grad school to study plant research in the field that I'm working. And so he wanted some advice on what grad schools to apply to and so on. So we set up a meeting, and I said, okay, I'll look at your list and help you refine it a little bit. And I noticed that on his list, he had a lot of places in South America. So I was curious and asked him why. And he said, well, South America, agriculture, the scale of agriculture in South America is like humongous, far different from the US, which is true. And he wanted to get a feel for that because he thought he might be interested after graduation to enter the industry. And so I said, okay, and we made a list, and I just mentioned, to him that, look, we have this company that we may be starting. And so if you wanted to experience it, you're welcome to come intern. And he said, okay, I'll think about it. And about a month or so later, he contacted me and asked me if the offer was still open. And I said, sure. And he interned for us a bit, but he did so well that we immediately hired him, even though I knew he was going to be around for only 6 months, because he was looking at graduate school in the fall. But he's still an employee at my company because he liked it so much. And we love him. And he was like, I'm still going to go to grad school, but I'm going to put that on hold because I'm having too much fun. So, it's little connections like that. So.
Marianne, I wanted to turn back to you for a second. You mentioned you're involved in several networking groups, and I know those are groups like Women in Health Tech and Global Women Inventors and Innovators Network. How important do you think these networks are in supporting women inventors, and what impact have you seen from all your involvement?
I think it's a mutual support network is really helpful. So the Women in Health Tech is really just a group of women working in health and related technologies who share advice and information with each other. It's quite informal, but I think I've seen a lot of conversations between members of the network where it's just kind of advice on seed funding, advice on, I need an agreement. Has anyone got a lawyer they can recommend? It's lots of just that's quite an informal, friendly and supportive network. So often, if someone's experienced a problem, then someone else will be able to recommend someone that they've, used in the past to help them address a similar problem. So it's a lot of just kind of mutual support and friendly, just a friendly sounding board, really. Global WIN, so that's the Global Women Inventors and Innovators Network, is a little bit different in that it's one, it's global, whereas women in health tech is kind of global, but it's definitely majority UK. But Global WIN is makes real efforts to be global, so it goes out to parts of the world which maybe have less funding available for women, less opportunity for women to engage with the IP systems, or also so they just, it's really kind of we see people applying for the awards every year across genuinely global. So I remember last year we had some applicants from Malaysia, some applicants from a couple of African countries. We had also women from Europe and the US and South America, but yeah, genuinely women from across the globe who then kind of provide a kind of summary of their invention. And the idea is that the awards recognize sort of a significant contribution or advancement in the area. And then that creates an opportunity to identify people who would benefit from mentorship. So really that's more hands-on involvement, more. So I help. I'm one of the people who examines the people who have submitted their applications and decides kind of which people to put forward and why. And that's partly deciding on who we think could benefit from mentorship from different people. So it's partly kind of the kind of an assessment of the idea itself, but it's also an assessment of do we think this person will particularly benefit from mentorship. So that's quite a different kind of network, but it's really an opportunity to try and identify a few people who could really benefit from help in getting their ideas forward. So I've enjoyed it in my involvement with both, but they're both quite different from each other, and I'm sure there are plenty of other networks out there as well which help women support other women and share ideas. But yeah, it's enjoyable but very different types of networks.
Yeah, those are very, very different networks. And keeping on the international kind of global theme for a second, you have a lot of experience in international patent prosecution. So what advice would you give to women inventors who are looking to protect their innovations globally?
So I think there's a lot of information out there available. Well, from my experience, so the USPTO have some kind of beginner's information, as it were, beginner's guide to different areas. I know the UK IPO do. The European Patent Office has started to move in that area. They used to more kind of look to provide a very efficient service, but they weren't necessarily as engaged with trying to sort of support small SMEs or individual inventors or startups, but they are starting to do that. But definitely, I'd look in the first place to the advice that you can get free of charge from the UK Intellectual Property Office, the US Patent and Trademark Office. But I would also say that you need to represent, although you can represent yourself before your own patent office, once you start to look globally, you need a local representative. So if you say you're a US citizen and you're interested in getting patent protection in the UK or in Europe as a whole, you need to be working with someone who's qualified to work in that office. So I'd reach out to people that you know. So if anyone has any questions about European patent practice, for example, I'd be very happy to, they'd be very welcome to contact me, and I'd be happy to help. So try and find people in your network, or if someone knows someone, kind of going back to that women in health tech, when it is a kind of, you could ask a question of someone, hey, do you know someone with experience of European patent prosecution? Because there are different kind of problems that occur typically in different patent offices and different styles of prosecution, really. So try and get some advice early on. Try and get a feel for what it is that you might need to do to seek protection in different areas. And I'm going to promote Europe. As a European patent attorney, I have to say that although the European Patent Office is not the most kind of user-friendly for the small organizations, nonetheless, they provide a very streamlined, very efficient service for getting protection in an area which is far bigger than the European Union. You can get a single patent granted that once validated, you've gone through all the formalities, could extend in protection from Iceland all the way down to Turkey, including almost every country in between. So we can be an efficient way of getting very wide-ranging coverage. But obviously, USPTO covers wide areas. You need to kind of figure out which. And that's one thing I suppose I would say is to think about the lifetime of a patent. A patent application should last 20 years once it's up to the end, when it's the end of its life, if you pay all your renewal fees. So it's not just a case of where you're operating at that point in time, but where you have ambitions to expand, and then a practical assessment. So again, assuming someone starting from the US, their application's been drafted in English, you can get patent protection in the European Patent Office using English. You can do the same in India. India's got a well-developed mature patent system, which is relatively inexpensive. It does get more expensive once you have to start paying for translations. So China, Japan, Korea will be more expensive. But yeah, look at where you're going to expand, where your competitors are going to work as well. It's not just a case of where you want to operate, but where you want to be able to maybe get license income if someone is willing to license your invention to work in an area which you don't think you're going to work in necessarily, but there could still be benefit of using your technology in that particular area. So yeah.
Yeah, completely agree with you. That is great advice. And so thank you for sharing that. And I want each of you now to pull out your crystal balls for a second and think about what opportunities you see on the horizon for women inventors, especially in each of your respective fields. And share with us if you think there are any emerging trends or areas that you hold particular promise. Aardra, do you want to maybe start?
Yeah, sure. So as far as science goes and like innovation in science, so I'm sure you're aware of the Chips and Science Act of 2022, and that has like put a lot of focus on the bioeconomy. So how can, U.S. inventions contribute more to U.S. societal needs and, of course, world societal needs? But built within that, so there are a lot of federal funding programs that are coming out of that Chips and Science Act, where the focus is on creating this pathway for a quicker and a more streamlined pathway for innovations that come out of universities and research institutions to make it to commercialization faster, and they're structured in a way that they support the original inventor a lot, but built within that, because a lot of almost every federal agency now is working towards diversifying the workforce. So there's a lot of focus on supporting women and minorities and other folks that are underrepresented to become those inventors and help them have that path to commercialization. So right now I'm on leave from the University of Kentucky, and I'm at the National Science Foundation. And so National Science Foundation has a whole directorate dedicated to this commercialization, and it's called the TIP, Technology and Innovation Partnerships. And they have really nice programs that are structured at different stages. So very early in research, midway through your research, when you're starting to look for partners. And every step of the way, the programs have these certain requirements. They're funding programs. So the funding is available to you if you apply and are selected. But part of the requirements are that you include in your application these partners that will help you along the way. And I see like really great merit in that, because it's from the get-go, like when I started, I had a lot of support too, but sometimes the information comes at you at different points, and maybe it's too late when it comes. And so these programs are trying to fix that issue. So, that's something in STEM that I have great hope for.
Yeah, the Chips and Science Act really is very exciting, and hopefully it will continue to get the funding it needs to perpetuate it going forward. That's definitely a key issue for sure. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But Marianne, how about for you?
Yeah, those sound like excellent programs. I know that we have similar things in the UK, probably at a significantly smaller scale. I guess I would encourage women innovators to not be backward in coming forward. I don't know if that's a phrase in the US, but yeah, to put themselves forward for opportunities that arise. I know a school friend of mine started a business and she's been awarded a grant. It's her and another female founder. So the two of them together co-founded their company, and they've been able to obtain a grant through a Women in Innovate, which wouldn't necessarily be available to men, for example. But I think not thinking too much about whether you should or shouldn't go for something and find out a little bit more. If it feels like it might be helpful, continue to find out more and maybe put yourself forward for it rather than feel reluctant. And as far as advances in the field, so I tend to specialize more now in clean tech. So I'm interested in environmentally beneficial technology. And I think there's quite a lot of women working in that area, which is really encouraging. A lot of, I think, motivation to try and solve some of the problems in this world and try and improve things. So we're all consuming a lot. We can consume things that are more environmentally benign or even beneficial than all for the good.
So as we wrap up the podcast, I wanted to ask the two of you, how do you think tech transfer professionals can better support women inventors and researchers in commercializing their innovations? And are there any changes you would like to see in the industry? Marianne, maybe we'll start with you.
I mean, I would say some of what we've said before in being willing to push back a little bit if women seem to be left off. So like you said, like maybe they've been included in a paper, but not included in a invention disclosure. One little bit of questioning as to why that is. As far as commercialization goes, I think where maybe you have only women involved in a project or predominantly women involved in a project, then getting them across that step of thinking that actually this is an idea that is worth commercializing. It's not just of academic interest. It's not just not yet at an advanced enough stage. So I think going out there and seeking out the women that they work with or the women within the organization that they work in to try and get to publicize their involvement, to publicize. I sometimes think it's obviously, inventions are fantastic. That's part of the reason we work in the area that we work in. But I think people think of it as being kind of like this kind of, it has to be this life-changing, incredible kind of thing. And actually, there's lots of little incremental things that are worthy of patent protection. And so maybe just trying to make, not just women are not the only ones who are going to benefit from understanding that actually that the threshold can be quite low. If it's something that is different in a way that other people would not have expected to work, that can still be hugely beneficial. It can still be worth protecting. It can still be commercially viable. It's so I think trying to educate the people that they work with within the organizations that they work with that actually come to us. We'd rather refuse more invention disclosures than not have enough to work with. Trying to encourage people to have more confidence in their ideas and confident in what could be achieved with those ideas.
Aardra, how about for you?
Yeah, I don't know if I can add more to what was just well articulated. But yeah, I like Marianne said, we touched on a lot of things, before. And I would say there is a lot of support, especially in a university setting, a lot of support at the beginning step is where, they want you to commercialize your innovation. And then you're sort of kind of left to your own because you're here are books and you can attend these conferences, but there's when you for a person like me who is a researcher, you have another job, and then this is something else that you're doing on top of that. And so I feel like that following through on that support system is very important. So having those role models and connecting people all along the pipeline, I think, is very important because every stage of the way you have to learn something new. So somewhere I was reading something and I read the term business advisor. And so apparently there have been people that are business advisors. And so if we can connect, with more women to these kind of folks, then I think it certainly would have helped me out.
Well, thank you, Marianne and Aardra, for all your time today, for sharing your insights and your experiences with us. And most importantly, thank you for all that you're doing to help try and empower women in innovation.
Well, thank you for having us. I'm excited to hear more of your podcasts because what you're doing is important too, I think.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a real pleasure talking to you both today. I hope we've helped make a difference, and I look forward to seeing how things develop with AUTM.
To our listeners, I hope you found this discussion as inspiring as I did. Until next time, this is Lisa Mueller signing off from Autumn on the Air.
Thanks for listening to Autumn on the Air with Lisa Mueller. Get social with us and share your thoughts. You can tweet us at AUTM or visit us online at autm.net. We'll be back next week on the air. Be sure to join us.